Officer Marcus Wilson stood frozen at the kennel entrance, his fingers gripping the chain-link fence until his knuckles blanched white against his dark skin. The metal bit into his palm, cold and unforgiving, much like the system he'd spent his career navigating. 5 years on the K-9 unit, 3 commendations for valor, countless successful tracks, reduced to this moment of naked betrayal. His beloved partner, Rex, a Belgian Malinois he'd raised from an 8-week pup, was gone. The empty space in the kennel screamed louder than any protest he could have voiced. In Rex's place cowered a skittish German shepherd with haunted eyes and a thick folder of documented training failures. The replacement dog pressed himself against the back wall of the kennel, tail tucked tight between his legs. A cast-off, a failure, a message. Protocol adjustment, Sergeant Brenner had called it, not even looking Marcus in the eye when delivering the news 15 minutes earlier. The sergeant's voice had carried that familiar false neutrality, the bureaucratic tone that disguised daggers as policy. The new dog needs rehabilitation. Consider it an opportunity to prove your versatility. The pause before that final word carried weight. Indictment. Challenge. The unspoken truth hung in the air between them, heavy as a storm cloud before lightning strikes. Rex, now reassigned to Officer Peterson, who'd been on the unit half as long as Marcus. Peterson, whose father golfed with the chief every Sunday. Peterson, who'd made no secret of his belief that certain officers had been helped along in their careers. Marcus's reflection distorted in the water bowl inside the kennel. Jaw clenched, eyes hollowed by a wound too fresh to mask. He'd seen that look before. In his father's face when passed over for promotion at the factory. In his own, in high school, when told certain sports might not be his thing, despite outperforming everyone at tryouts. The new dog, Ranger, according to his paperwork, shivered visibly. His coat lacked the glossy sheen of a well-cared-for animal. One ear bore the scar of what appeared to be an old bite wound. His ribs showed through his coat, not from neglect, but from the perpetual stress that burned calories faster than they could be consumed. Marcus recognized the signs. The dog had been returned, passed around, written off. "You've got 3 weeks until the certification trials," Brenner had added, already walking away, keys jingling at his belt like a jailer's ring. "Everyone will be watching. Everyone will be watching." The words echoed in Marcus's head, reverberating against the walls of memory. He'd heard variations of that phrase his entire life. In the academy, during firearms qualification, his first drug bust, always watching. Always judging, always waiting for the black officer to slip, to confirm the unspoken suspicion that his presence was a concession rather than a contribution. The department radio crackled to life on his shoulder. "Wilson, you're needed at the training yard. Bring the new asset. Asset. Not partner, not dog." The deliberate dehumanization stung, though he kept his voice level when responding. "Copy that. En route." He unlatched the kennel door slowly, telegraphing each movement. Ranger pressed himself further against the concrete wall, trembling, intensifying. Marcus knelt, making himself smaller, less threatening. He held out an open palm, empty of threat or demand. "I see you," he whispered, not reaching, not forcing, just witnessing the fear without judgment. "I see what they've done to you." 7 minutes later, in the training yard, with every other handler mysteriously finding reason to observe this protocol adjustment, Marcus knelt before the trembling Ranger. The dog had followed him from the kennel only after several false starts, advancing, retreating, circling nervously. Now they faced each other in a ring of silent spectators, waiting for the entertainment of failure. Marcus leaned forward, close enough that only the dog could hear the words he spoke. A promise. A covenant between the discarded and the disrespected, and no one dared laugh after that. Have you ever been set up to fail, with eyes waiting for your downfall? The certification trials weren't mere tests, they were theater, public spectacle designed to separate the exceptional from the adequate, all under the merciless spotlight of scrutiny. 24 grueling obstacles, precision commands, suspect apprehension scenarios with volunteers who sometimes took perverse pleasure in making the exercise harder than necessary. All performed before department brass, county officials, and fellow officers whose expressions betrayed varying degrees of support or schadenfreude. Failure meant immediate removal from the K9 unit. For someone like Marcus, it also meant confirmation of the whispers that had followed him since the academy. He doesn't belong here, just filling a quota. Diversity hire. The morning after Rex's reassignment, Marcus arrived at the kennels before dawn. The facility stood empty except for the dogs and the ghosts of institutional prejudice that haunted the concrete floors. The beam of his flashlight cut through darkness as he made his way to Ranger's Run. Wilson got stuck with the washout he'd overheard in the locker room the previous afternoon. The words had drifted from behind the row of metal doors, speakers either unaware of his presence or unconcerned by it. That dog's been through 3 handlers already. Bit the last one during apprehension training. Bet you Brenner did it on purpose, came another voice, lower but distinct enough. Can't have too many diversity hires showing up the veterans. Bad for morale when certain officers advance too quickly. Laughter. Then silence as he rounded the corner, faces suddenly occupied with shoelaces and equipment checks. The words should have cut deeper. Perhaps they would have, if Marcus hadn't spent a lifetime developing calluses over these particular wounds. Instead, he had channeled the energy elsewhere, into preparation, into excellence, into proving through performance what should never have needed proving in the first place. Ranger lay curled in the corner of his kennel, eyes tracking Marcus's approach, with the wariness of an animal accustomed to human unpredictability. Not aggression, fear. The file hadn't mentioned fear, only aggressive tendencies and failure to bond. Marcus wondered how many reports omitted the handler's contribution to those failures. "Morning," he said softly, unlatching the door. "We've got work to do. Before dawn, after dusk." While others went home to their families, Marcus remained at the training grounds. Rain-soaked mornings when water plastered his uniform to his skin. Sun-blistered afternoons when heat rose in visible waves from the asphalt. The rhythmic pattern of man and dog moving as one, building trust one heartbeat at a time. At first, Ranger flinched at every touch. A hand raised to signal, "Sit," sent him cowering. By the end of the first week, he would at least hold position while Marcus moved around him. Small victory. Insufficient progress for the trials looming like executioners on the horizon. Most of the other handlers stopped coming to watch after those initial days. Nothing entertaining about a man and dog struggling through basic commands. The expected humiliation had turned mundane, tedious. The spectacle lacked sufficient failure to sustain interest. Most, but not all. Peterson brought Rex to the adjacent training area daily. The Belgian Malinois would whine and pull toward his former handler, confusion evident in every line of his body. The separation had been abrupt. No transition period, no gradual handoff as protocol recommended. Peterson would jerk the leash at these displays of loyalty. "Focus, Rex. Forget your old friends." Rex's plaintive whine carried across the training yard, each note a fresh laceration across Marcus's concentration. He forced himself to remain focused on Ranger, even as his peripheral vision caught the familiar russet coat of his former partner straining against Peterson's corrections. The sergeant made a show of checking Marcus's training log each evening, flipping through pages with theatrical dismay. "Not much progress here, Wilson. Day 6 and still on basic position commands? Maybe some people just have a natural touch with these animals that others don't." Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, meeting Brenner's gaze directly. The sergeant's eyes held the cold calculation of a man who believed he'd devised the perfect trap. 3 weeks, sir. You'll have my resignation if we fail." That's mighty confident for someone whose dog still can't complete a basic send-around without breaking position. Brenner's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But I appreciate the offer. I'll have the form ready, just in case." Later that night, alone in the quiet kennel, Marcus sat cross-legged on the concrete floor of Ranger's Run. The building stood empty, officers and administrative staff long gone. Only the occasional shuffle or sigh from the other dogs broke the stillness. Ranger watched him warily from the corner, maintaining the exact distance that had characterized their relationship thus far, close enough to observe, far enough to flee if necessary. "I know what it's like," Marcus whispered, his voice barely disturbing the air between them. "When they've already decided what you can't do." Ranger's ears twitched forward, the first sign of genuine interest he'd shown. "They don't know what we know." Marcus extended his hand, palm up, unmoving on his knee. An invitation without pressure. Sometimes the strongest thing isn't steel or muscle. It's patience. The willingness to wait for trust rather than demand it. For the first time, Ranger stepped forward. His movement came hesitant at first, then with growing certainty. He sniffed the offered hand, nostrils flaring as he processed the scent of this human who asked for nothing, made no sudden moves, expected nothing but presence. The German shepherd's muscles remained tense, ready for flight, but something new flickered in his amber eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to be measured against invisible standards, to be found wanting before the test began. In the sterile confines of the municipal kennel, dog and handler regarded each other with newfound awareness. Two beings the system had attempted to discard, now taking each other's measure, making a choice. Would you have retreated under the weight of their expectation or pushed forward despite it? 10 days before the certification trials, the real challenges emerged like sentries guarding the path to redemption. Ranger could now perform basic obedience with growing confidence: sit, stay, heel, come, but struggled with the critical components that defined a working police K9. Suspect apprehension, where the dog must engage a padded perpetrator with precise targeting of the arm or leg. Evidence retrieval, requiring the delicate handling of contaminated materials without damage. And most concerning, the scent discrimination that formed the backbone of K9 work. The ability to isolate a specific odor from a symphony of competing smells. Marcus paced the perimeter of the training field, heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner demanding release. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon, bathing the world in that peculiar golden light that made everything seem possible. Ranger watched him from a seated position at center field, alert now but still uncertain. His posture had improved, spine straighter, head higher, ears forward instead of flattened against his skull in perpetual submission. The sun caught on something at Marcus's wrist, a weathered leather band with a small silver charm that glinted with each movement. A paw print worn nearly smooth from years of unconscious rubbing. His fingers found it now, a talisman against doubt. "My first partner," he explained to Ranger, who tilted his head at the sound of Marcus's voice. The gesture, so canine in its curiosity, brought an unexpected tightness to Marcus's throat. "Before Rex. Before the Force even. A rescue pit bull named Sadie who saved me from myself after I came back from Afghanistan." The field lay before them, meticulously prepared for the day's training. 5 identical canvas bags arranged in a wide semicircle, each containing different scents. 4 decoys, 1 target. In trials, finding the correct one could mean the difference between locating a missing child or coming up empty, between a successful drug interdiction or a fruitless search, between life and death. So far, Ranger had failed this exercise 17 consecutive times. Lieutenant Rivera appeared at the fence line, clipboard in hand. Unlike Brenner, she made no pretense about her observations, no thin veneer of neutrality over agenda. Her presence was direct, professional. Her gaze took in both man and dog with clinical precision. "How's it going, Wilson?" "We're working through it, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed, sharp enough to cut through pretense. "You know, there's no shame in admitting when you've been given an impossible task. No one would blame you." "Nothing's impossible," Marcus replied, the words automatic. A mantra that had carried him through deployments, through the police academy, through every obstacle engineered to suggest he didn't belong. Just differently difficult. "Brenner's had it out for you since you outperformed his nephew at the regional trials last year," she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder to ensure privacy. "This isn't just about the dog or protocol adjustments." Marcus's fingers found the leather bracelet again, thumb tracing the worn edges of the silver paw. "With respect, ma'am, it's always about the dog and the handler. Nothing else matters when you're in the field and lives depend on what you and your partner can do." She studied him a moment longer, something unreadable shifting in her expression. "Your military record indicates you were a combat tracker before K9 handling. Different discipline entirely. Same principles, different application." He turned his attention back to Ranger, who remained in position, watching their exchange with obvious interest. Dogs understand intentions better than words. Rivera's radio crackled, breaking the moment. She adjusted the volume before responding, then turned back to Marcus. "Good luck, Wilson. Some of us are actually hoping you pull this off." The admission came tinged with something that might have been embarrassment, as though acknowledging the department's open secret required courage of its own. Alone again with Ranger, Marcus knelt until they were eye to eye. The distance between them had shrunk over the days. Physical space collapsed by growing trust. The silence between them deepened, not empty, but full of unspoken understanding. He thought of his grandmother's words, spoken often during his childhood in South Carolina. "The quietest moment is right before the miracle." "The world gets loud," Marcus whispered to Ranger. "People talking, judging, making noise to fill the spaces where truth lives. But what matters happens in the silence, in the breath between decision and action." The dog's eyes locked with his, something new stirring there. Recognition beyond mere familiarity. Connection beyond mere proximity. The beginnings of partnership. Tomorrow, they would try again. Tomorrow, they would face the scent discrimination that had defeated them 17 times. Tomorrow, they would see if silence could speak louder than doubt. Marcus scratched gently behind Ranger's ear, feeling the dog lean into his touch for the first time. "Rest today. Tomorrow we change the rules." The weight of impossibility pressed against his shoulders like gravity doubled. But in the space between handler and dog, something new had taken root. Something green and growing in the wasteland of expectation. 2 officers lingered at the fence the next morning, coffee cups steaming in the early chill that heralded approaching autumn. Their conversation died abruptly as Marcus approached the training area with Ranger, who now trotted confidently at his side. The transformation, while still incomplete, had become noticeable enough to draw attention, and with it, renewed skepticism. "Watch this," one muttered to the other, voice carrying deliberately across the quiet field. "Brenner says the dog's got about a 5-minute attention span before he starts chasing shadows. Wilson's been putting on a show with basic commands, but the real tests are where it falls apart." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though each word landed like a physical blow against his resolve. The casual cruelty, the assumption of failure, these were familiar adversaries, old wounds reopened with surgical precision. He unclipped Ranger's leash, removing the physical tether while strengthening the invisible one forming between them. The scent discrimination setup waited at Field Center. 5 canvas pouches arranged in a perfect circle, identical in appearance but worlds apart in content. 4 contained ordinary items: a tennis ball, a leather glove, a plastic chew toy, a folded department t-shirt. 1 held the training target, a small bundle of cloth bearing the scent of the missing person they needed to locate. Instead of the standard commands, the ones that had failed 17 consecutive times, Marcus tried something different. Something from his combat tracking days in Afghanistan, where he'd worked with military working dogs using protocols that differed from standard police K9 training. "Pattern," he whispered. Just 1 word, paired with a subtle hand gesture barely visible to the observers at the fence. Not the sweeping arm movement used in standard K9 direction, but a small circular motion with 2 fingers, the military signal for establishing search grid. Ranger's entire demeanor shifted, as though someone had flipped a hidden switch. His head raised, ears perfectly erect, body vibrating with newfound purpose. The military working dogs in Afghanistan had used different protocols than police K9s, different languages, different movements. More subtle communications developed for combat environments where excessive noise or motion could alert enemies. The German Shepherd began a precise grid search of the area, methodical in a way he'd never shown before. Instead of the frantic, nose-down scramble of previous attempts, he moved with deliberate precision. 2 steps, pause, scent check, 2 more steps, building a mental map of the invisible scent landscape. The observing officers straightened, coffee forgotten as they pressed closer to the fence. The transformation unfolding before them defied expectation, the washout dog suddenly performing with military precision. Ranger moved to each pouch in sequence, giving each the same careful consideration. When he reached the 4th one, containing the target scent, he didn't immediately alert as a police K9 would. Instead, he completed his pattern, checking all 5 before returning to stand before the correct pouch. Marcus remained motionless, silent, watching. This was the moment where Ranger had faltered before, the crucial juncture where certainty dissolved into confusion. The dog turned to him, waiting for confirmation. Their eyes locked across the training field, communication flowing between them without sound or movement. The silence stretched between them, building not tension, but trust. The sacred space before commitment, where intention crystallized into certainty. Finally, Marcus gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Permission, affirmation, partnership. Ranger barked once, decisive and clear, then dropped to a perfect down position beside the target pouch. No wavering, no second guessing. "What the hell was that?" one of the officers asked, loud enough to break the spell of concentration. Marcus collected the target pouch, confirming Ranger's selection with a brief word of praise and a gentle touch to the dog's shoulder. Just speaking his language instead of expecting him to speak mine. The officers exchanged glances, charged with disbelief and something that might have been reluctant respect. One made a show of checking his watch. "Let's see if he can repeat it, or if it was just luck." Marcus reset the exercise, rearranging the pouches and replacing the target scent with a fresh sample. Ranger watched the process with newfound intensity, body still but mind visibly engaged. When given the command, he executed the same methodical pattern search, identified the target, and alerted with equal precision. 3 more repetitions, 3 more successes, each one eroding the edifice of doubt the observers had constructed. By afternoon, the training yard had filled with spectators. Word had spread through the department with the inexorable efficiency of gossip that confirmed biases. The washout dog was suddenly performing military-grade search patterns. The impossible task looked slightly less impossible. The anticipated failure had transformed into something more intriguing, the possibility, however remote, of success. Sergeant Brenner appeared as the sun reached its zenith, face flushed with exertion or emotion. He watched a successful search sequence, arms crossed tightly over his chest, before approaching Marcus at the edge of the field. "Using combat protocols isn't standard procedure, Wilson." The words came clipped, precise as a surgeon's incision. "The certification committee expects standard police K-9 methodology. No rule against it in the certification requirements, sir." Marcus kept his voice level, professional, though adrenaline surged beneath the calm exterior. "The documentation simply states that the dog needs to locate and alert on the target scent. Method isn't specified. The judges might not recognize." "Then I'll educate them," Marcus replied, the steel in his voice matching the steel in his spine. Years of accommodation, of careful navigation around fragile egos and institutional barriers, compressed into quiet defiance. "Unless there's a specific reason you don't want us to succeed?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and charged with accumulated grievance. Officers nearby fell silent, attention ostensibly on their own tasks, but ears tuned to the confrontation. Brenner's jaw worked silently, a muscle jumping beneath flushed skin. "Just following protocol, Wilson. Making sure everything's by the book." He turned away, defeat disguised as dismissal. "Carry on." That night, for the first time, Ranger slept at the foot of Marcus's cot in the overnight quarters, not in the kennel. The department maintained Spartan accommodations for handlers working intensive training periods, little more than a military-style barracks with 6 beds, usually empty except during special operations or certification prep. Marcus lay awake, listening to the deep, even breathing of the dog who had begun to trust him. Outside, rain began to fall, droplets tapping against the roof in nature's percussion. Trust, building like a fortress, one brick at a time, invisible but increasingly unshakable. "They expect us to fail," he whispered into the darkness. Ranger's ear twitched in response, though his eyes remained closed. They've never seen someone turn military tracking protocols into police work. They've never seen what happens when you stop trying to force a dog into a system and build a system around the dog instead. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows now. Nature's applause for defiance or warning of storms to come. Either way, they would face it together. Certification day arrived with a hard, driving rain that turned the training grounds to mud and washed the world in shades of gray. Not ideal conditions, but somehow fitting for the culmination of their journey. Nothing about this path had been ideal. Why should its conclusion offer comfort? The stands erected for the occasion were unusually full despite the weather. Word had spread beyond the department, drawing observers from neighboring agencies, and even a few civilians granted special permission to attend. Local news had even sent a camera crew, rare for certification trials, which typically warranted at most a paragraph in the community section of the newspaper. The story had evolved beyond simple departmental politics. Black handler given problem dog in apparent setup, now poised to either triumph or crash spectacularly. Human interest with a side of potential controversy. Marcus and Ranger waited in the holding area, a canvas tent that offered minimal protection from the elements. They were last in the testing sequence, another of Brenner's protocol adjustments that ensured maximum pressure. 6 other handler dog teams had already completed their certifications. 5 had passed. 1 had failed during the building search portion. Through the tent flap, Marcus watched Peterson and Rex complete their run with mechanical precision. Good, but rigid. The Belgian Malinois executed each command without hesitation, but also without the fluid grace that had characterized his work with Marcus. The bond visible but manufactured, like furniture assembled from a kit, rather than carved from living wood. They would pass, certainly. Excellence, however, remained elusive. Lieutenant Rivera approached through the rain, poncho drawn tight around her uniform, water dripping from the brim of her cap. Her expression carried the weight of unwelcome news. Brenner convinced the evaluation committee to add an extra scenario, she said without preamble. Urban tracking through the abandoned office complex at the edge of the training grounds. It wasn't in the original test parameters. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. When conventional obstacles failed to produce the desired result, new barriers could always be erected. Of course he did. It's a tough environment. Multiple floors, broken glass, conflicting scents from years of occupancy. No team has trained specifically for that space. She hesitated, concern evident beneath professional detachment. Even the best dogs struggle with environmental transitions without preparation. We'll manage. Rivera studied him, searching for something beyond the practiced calm. You're not surprised. Would it help if I were? Marcus checked Ranger's tracking harness, adjusting the straps with deliberate focus. The dog stood calmly beneath his hands, a far cry from the trembling creature who had cowered in the kennel 3 weeks earlier. Changing rules mid-game is a familiar experience. She hesitated, glancing back toward the evaluation committee huddled beneath a canopy at the edge of the field. Wilson, I need to ask. That bracelet, the one with the paw print, I've seen you touch it before every exercise. Marcus's hand moved unconsciously to his wrist, fingers finding the worn leather and smooth silver. My first dog, like I said. The thing is, Rivera continued, voice lowered, I checked your military record more thoroughly. Standard procedure before certification. Your first tracking dog in Afghanistan was named Apollo, not Sadie. The rain drummed against the tent, filling the silence between them. Ranger pressed against Marcus's leg, sensing the shift in energy. Sadie wasn't military, Marcus said finally. She wasn't a working dog at all, by most definitions. She was the reason I joined the military, my neighbor's fighting dog. Abused, left to die after she refused to fight. I rehabilitated her when everyone said she was too far gone. His fingers traced the worn silver charm. She showed me what's possible when you stop seeing what is and start seeing what could be. Understanding dawned in Rivera's eyes. And that's why you requested K9 when you joined the department. Dogs don't care what color your skin is. They don't care where you grew up or how you talk. They care about consistency, truth, the alignment between what you say and what you do. The words emerged not as justification, but as simple fact. Everything else is human noise. Rivera's radio crackled, a tinny voice cutting through the sound of rain. Wilson and Ranger, you're up. Committee's waiting. The course stood before them, transformed by rain into something more treacherous than designed. Mud-slicked obstacles, reduced visibility. The final segment, the surprise urban tracking, would take them into the condemned office building at the edge of the training grounds, a 3-story relic of 1980s architecture now awaiting demolition. The crowd fell silent as Marcus and Ranger took their positions at the starting line. Brenner stood with the evaluation committee beneath their canopy, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Expectation of failure radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer. Marcus knelt beside Ranger, one hand resting lightly on the dog's shoulder. The world around them faded. The rain, the spectators, the politics, all of it dissolved into the space between heartbeats. The moment of perfect alignment between intention and action, between handler and dog, between past and future. The silence before action, the ritual of focus that preceded every meaningful endeavor. Sacred space carved from chaos. "Trust yourself," Marcus whispered, words meant only for Ranger's ears. "I do." The starter whistle pierced the air, sharp as a blade through fabric. They moved like water, fluid, relentless, finding the path of least resistance through each obstacle. The standard course elements fell behind them. Agility section, with its jumps and tunnels and climbing walls. Scent discrimination, now expanded to 10 identical containers. Suspect apprehension, where Ranger engaged the padded department volunteer with precise targeting of the arm, neither too high to risk the throat, nor too low to miss entirely. Each element completed with a precision that drew murmurs from the crowd and stone-faced observation from the evaluation committee. Not perfection, nothing human or animal achieved that, but excellence wrought from unlikely material. Then came the building. Dark, decaying, multiple stories of confusion and risk, with broken windows that admitted both rain and competing scents from the outside world. A tracking nightmare under ideal conditions. Under these, nearly impossible. Marcus unclipped the standard tracking harness, went to attach the longer lead required for building searches, and paused. Decision crystallized in a moment of clarity. In a move that caused audible gasps from the evaluation committee, he left Ranger completely off-leash. "Find," he commanded, paired with the subtle hand signal they'd perfected during their training. The military command for self-directed search pattern. Ranger vanished into the building's shadows, a gray ghost against gray concrete. Marcus followed at a measured distance, maintaining visual contact, but allowing the dog to work unencumbered by physical connection. This wasn't procedure. This wasn't protocol. This was trust elevated to partnership. Through collapsed cubicles, still littered with the detritus of abandoned careers. Up unstable stairwells where water had weakened ancient carpet. Across floors with missing sections that required careful navigation. The hidden target, a training dummy with a specific scent profile, had been placed somewhere in the complex's maze. 4 minutes in, Brenner's voice came through the radio all handlers carried. "Wilson, department protocol requires the dog to be on lead during building searches." Marcus didn't respond, couldn't respond. Every ounce of his focus tracked Ranger's movements through the decaying office complex, reading the subtle shifts in body language that told him the dog was narrowing in on the target. 6th floor, northwest corner, a former executive suite now stripped to concrete and exposed wiring. Rain streamed through a partially collapsed ceiling, creating a miniature waterfall that divided the room. Ranger froze, body rigid with certainty, then slowly approached what appeared to be a sealed maintenance closet. He performed the passive alert they'd practiced for situations requiring subtlety rather than aggression, sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed on the target location. Marcus checked the door. Locked. Not part of the standard protocol for certification testing, where handlers needed access to verify their dog's alert. Someone had secured the target in a way that would require human intervention. Without hesitation, he gave Ranger the command they'd developed for situations when standard approaches failed. Alternative. The German Shepherd immediately began investigating the room's periphery, moving with methodical precision until he located a ventilation duct near floor level. With careful maneuvering, he slipped inside, disappearing from view. Marcus heard him moving through the building's circulatory system, claws clicking against metal. The sound receded, then fell silent. 1 second stretched to 5, 10, 20. Then, from inside the closet, came a single, triumphant bark. Marcus smiled, relief and pride washing through him in equal measure. "That's my boy." Ranger had navigated the ventilation system to access the closet from within. Unconventional, unprecedented in certification trials. Exactly the kind of adaptive problem-solving that separated exceptional working dogs from merely adequate ones. When Marcus finally unlocked the closet door, using his department-issued multi-tool to defeat the simple lock, Ranger sat beside the training dummy, posture perfect, eyes bright with the satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. The radio crackled to life. Rivera's voice, tight with suppressed excitement. Time is called. Wilson and Ranger have completed all elements of the certification course. The silence that followed carried more weight than applause ever could. The evaluation committee argued for 20 minutes about whether to disqualify them for going off-leash and using the ventilation system. Voices rose and fell beneath the canopy where they huddled, occasionally glancing toward Marcus and Ranger, who waited in the rain, neither seeking shelter nor showing discomfort. The dog leaned against the handler's leg, a physical manifestation of the bond forged through adversity. Lieutenant Rivera's voice carried across the field several times, the only female member of the committee, and apparently their most vigorous advocate. Her hand gestures grew more emphatic as the discussion continued, finger jabbing at the certification documentation she'd brought. In the end, her advocacy prevailed. Nowhere in the rules did it specify how a handler and dog should reach their target, only that they must do so efficiently and accurately. The ventilation system, while unorthodox, demonstrated problem-solving ability beyond what was typically expected of a certified team. Marcus and Ranger stood in the center of the training yard, rain still falling but lighter now, as if the sky itself had exhausted its fury. The crowd had remained, sheltered under umbrellas and ponchos, waiting for the final verdict. Silence fell as Chief Wilson stepped forward, evaluation clipboard in hand. The chief's face revealed nothing as he approached, years of police work having perfected his professional mask. Water beaded on his uniform, darkening the fabric to near black. "Officer Wilson," he began, voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. "What we witnessed today was—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Unorthodox." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, speculation flowing like electricity through a conductor. "But," the chief continued, raising a hand to quiet the whispers, "this department has always claimed to value results over process, innovation over tradition, when tradition fails to serve our community effectively." He glanced down at the clipboard, though it seemed more performance than necessity. "Your performance time was the fastest in department history. Your accuracy was perfect across all test elements. Your bond with an animal everyone had written off as untrainable is undeniable." The chief extended his hand. "Congratulations, Officer Wilson. You and Ranger have not only passed certification, but set a new department standard for adaptive problem-solving in the field. The committee has recommended commendation for excellence." The applause began slowly, tentatively, then built to a crescendo that defied the continuing rain. Even some of the handlers who had predicted failure now joined in acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. Excellence commanded respect, however reluctantly given. Sergeant Brenner stood apart, face unreadable. When the chief looked his way, he offered a curt nod before turning to leave, shoulders rigid beneath his rain-soaked uniform. Later, as Marcus was loading equipment into his vehicle, Peterson approached, Rex at his side. The Belgian Malinois strained toward Marcus, whining softly in recognition, tail sweeping in wide arcs of undisguised joy. "They're reassigning dogs next week," Peterson said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "I've requested a transfer to patrol." Marcus said nothing, just waited. The rain had stopped entirely, leaving the world washed clean, glistening under emerging sunlight. "Look, what Brenner did wasn't right," Peterson continued, words emerging with obvious effort. "I didn't know at first, but when I figured it out," he shrugged uncomfortably. "I should have said something. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." The admission hung between them, neither accusation nor absolution, simply truth. The silence between them held no warmth, but perhaps a measure of understanding. The system that had benefited Peterson also constrained him, rewarding complicity while punishing courage. Different prisons, different wardens, same institution. Peterson handed him Rex's leash. "He never really bonded with me anyway. Still looks for you every time we come to the yard." As Peterson walked away, Marcus knelt between the two dogs, his first partner and his new one. Rex nuzzled his face enthusiastically, while Ranger sat at perfect attention, watching, learning, integrating this new development into his understanding of their world. Sometimes, respect isn't given, Marcus said softly, one hand on each dog. It's earned, not through fear or power, but through consistency and truth. Lieutenant Rivera approached, a department envelope in hand. Her usual professional demeanor had softened, revealing something that might have been admiration. The chief wants to see you Monday. Something about forming an advanced tracking unit with these two as the foundation. Marcus nodded. The weight of the past 3 weeks, the doubt, the exhaustion, the silent determination, beginning to lift from his shoulders like mist burned away by morning sun. Turns out, Rivera added with a slight smile, seeing something as broken doesn't make it so. Sometimes it just means you don't understand its strength. The rain had stopped entirely now. The clouds parted, revealing a sky washed clean of storm. New possibilities stretched before them like the training field, challenging but navigable. Marcus looked at his dogs, then out at the training yard where so many had gathered to witness what they expected to be his failure. The silver pawprint charm caught the emerging sunlight, a small beacon of what had been and what could still be. The world makes assumptions, he said quietly. Our job isn't to correct them. It's to outlast them. When was the moment you proved everyone wrong? When did your silence speak louder than their doubt?